The soft hum of the bakery's display case filled the air, mingling with the smell of sugar, butter, and faint regret. The late afternoon sun poured through the dusty glass windows, painting golden streaks across the floor, where customers came and went with boxes of cakes far more extravagant than anyone really needed. But in the far corner, almost hidden from view, sat a thin, quiet girl in a wheelchair, her trembling hands clutching 3 crumpled dollar bills. Her name was Lila, and today was her 15th birthday. She had rehearsed her words over and over, whispering them under her breath as if the courage might stay long enough to make it real. Just a small one, please. That's what she planned to say when it was her turn at the counter, but the world never seemed to wait for her turn. The line was long, the laughter around her loud, and her voice, like so much else in her life, felt trapped somewhere deep inside her chest. Her wheelchair squeaked as she tried to move forward. The rubber wheels, worn smooth, resisted every push. The cashier, a woman in her 20s with perfect eyeliner and impatience to match, noticed her too late. "Ma'am, the line is moving," she said, though there was no real kindness in the tone. Lila swallowed. Her throat burned. She pushed herself another inch, the edge of her bag catching on the display counter. When she finally reached the front, she slid her $3 across the counter like they were diamonds. I just want a small cake," she whispered. Her voice barely reached the cashier. The woman blinked at the money, then at the girl. "Honey, the cheapest cake we have is $12.99, she said flatly, already turning her eyes to the next customer. "I can get a cupcake, maybe." A murmur rippled through the line, some amused, some pitying, most indifferent. Lila's heart twisted. Her gaze dropped to the small frosted cakes lined up behind the glass. Round, pink, perfect, and she imagined her mother's voice, before the accident, telling her birthdays were meant to be celebrated no matter how small. But her mother was gone now, her father too, and the aunt she lived with barely remembered her birthday at all. Lila took a shaky breath. "Could I maybe just have a piece?" she asked softly, trying to sound braver than she felt. The cashier's sigh was sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Sweetheart, we don't sell pieces of cake. You can come back when you have more money." Then she turned away, calling out, "Next, please." The word hit harder than intended. Next. As if she was something the world just had to skip over. Her fingers tightened on the armrests of her chair. Her eyes stung, but she blinked fast, refusing to let the tears fall in public. She turned the wheels slowly, trying to back away, but one of them jammed against the floor mat. The sound drew glances and whispers, small, sharp, merciless. "Can someone move her? She's blocking the way," a man muttered behind her. That was the moment it happened, the moment that would change everything. A figure near the back of the line stepped forward. He wasn't anyone special at first glance. Worn jeans, a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up just enough to show a tattoo of a name on his wrist. His eyes were tired but kind. A little boy clung to his side, no older than 7, holding a balloon that said, "Happy birthday, Dad." The man, Ethan, gently rested a hand on his son's shoulder and whispered something. Then he walked straight toward Lila. Everyone else seemed frozen in their own world of convenience and impatience, but Ethan's steps cut through the noise. He crouched beside Lila's wheelchair, lowering himself to her level. "Hey there," he said, voice soft but steady. "You trying to buy a cake?" Lila hesitated. I only have $3. He looked at the bills in her hand, then at her small, trembling fingers. Something flickered across his face, recognition maybe. The kind that comes from knowing what it's like to feel unseen. $3, huh?" he said. You came prepared." For the first time that day, Lila let out a tiny, nervous laugh. Ethan smiled. "Tell you what," he said, glancing at the cashier. "How about we make that $3 the start of something better?" Before Lila could reply, he stood and called out to the counter, his voice confident but kind. "We'll take that pink cake in the back. Yeah, the one with the candles." He pulled out his wallet. The bakery went silent for a heartbeat. Lila's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "No, please, you don't have to." Ethan shook his head. "Birthdays don't wait, kiddo. Not for anyone." The cashier smiled awkwardly, realizing her mistake too late. Lila watched as Ethan handed her the money, his son bouncing beside him, whispering, "Dad, who's the girl?" Ethan glanced down at his son. "Someone who deserves a good birthday just like you and me." The cake was boxed and handed over with a thin white ribbon. The smell of frosting filled the air, warm and sweet. Ethan placed it carefully on Lila's lap, smiling. "Happy birthday," he said softly. Lila couldn't speak. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears of sadness this time, but something different, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of laughter from the park across the street. The little boy tugged on his dad's sleeve. "Can she come with us, Daddy? We can share the cake." Ethan paused, looking at Lila as if weighing a question larger than both of them. Then a gentle smile crossed his face. "Yeah," he said, "I think we should." But just as Lila began to smile, just as she thought maybe, just maybe, her birthday wasn't ruined after all, a sound erupted outside. Tires screeched. A woman screamed. Ethan's smile vanished as he turned toward the glass, and that's when everything changed. The scream cut through the bakery's warmth like a knife. Heads turned toward the front windows where, just beyond the glass, a car had skidded across the intersection, its tires shrieking against the pavement. Time seemed to freeze for a moment. Just the smell of burning rubber, the gasps of strangers, and the sight of a mother clutching her stroller in the middle of the road. Ethan didn't think. He didn't measure the risk or weigh the odds. His body just moved. He bolted toward the door, his son's shout echoing behind him. "Dad!" Lila's heart jumped to her throat. She saw Ethan sprint into the street, his flannel shirt flaring behind him like a flag. The car was spinning out of control, its front bumper smoking. The woman had frozen, trapped between instinct and terror, but Ethan reached her just in time, grabbing the stroller handle, pulling her and the baby clear to the curb, as the car slammed into a lamppost with a metallic roar. The world erupted in chaos, shouts, cries, and the wail of a car alarm. People rushed out of the bakery, phones raised, recording, as if life and death moments were just another video to share. Ethan was on his knees, catching his breath. The mother sobbed, clutching her baby tight, whispering thank you again and again. His son Noah ran to him, face pale. "Dad, are you okay?" Ethan smiled weakly. "Yeah, buddy. We're fine." But there was blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow, and his hands trembled from the adrenaline. Inside the bakery, Lila sat frozen, her fingers gripping the box on her lap. Her chest felt heavy, like she was watching a movie that had suddenly turned too real. She wanted to go out there to thank him, to make sure he was okay, but the thought of maneuvering her wheelchair through the crowd made her chest tighten. The memory of her accident flashed in her mind, quick and cruel. 2 years ago, a rainy night, a truck that didn't stop in time, and the sound of her own mother's scream. It all came back in sharp, unbearable fragments. That was the night she lost her ability to walk. That was the night her world collapsed into silence and pity. Now, watching Ethan kneel beside the shaken woman, something stirred inside her. It was that same helpless feeling, the desperate wish to do something, to matter. When the sirens grew louder, Ethan finally stood. Paramedics rushed in, helping the driver and checking on the mother and child. Ethan waved off the attention, insisting he was fine, even as his knees shook slightly. He turned toward the bakery, toward Lila. Their eyes met through the glass. For a moment, the noise around them faded. She saw not a hero, but a man who looked just as broken and tired as she often felt. His smile wasn't the confident kind. It was the kind born from pain, from loss, from carrying too much alone. Minutes later, when he re-entered the bakery with Noah by his side, people clapped. Lila didn't. She was still too stunned. Ethan brushed off the attention with an awkward laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guess I still remember how to run," he joked. But his eyes flicked toward Lila again, softer this time. Noah tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, can we still share the cake?" Ethan crouched beside Lila again. "Sorry about that. Didn't mean to give you a heart attack." Lila's voice wavered. You saved them," he shrugged. "Would have done it for anyone." The bakery owner brought him a towel for his cut, muttering apologies and offering him a free pastry. But Ethan waved it off. "Give it to her instead," he said, nodding toward Lila. The owner hesitated, then smiled awkwardly. "Of course." As the small chocolate pastry was placed in front of her, Lila stared at it. She had dreamed of having just one small cake to herself, but now it didn't feel like it was just hers anymore. It felt shared, a symbol of something bigger. Ethan smiled and said, "My son and I are heading to the park down the street. We usually sit under the big oak tree near the fountain. You should join us. Celebrate your birthday properly. She hesitated. Her instinct was to say no, to stay hidden, to not make anyone's day more complicated. But something in his tone, gentle, certain, made her nod before she could stop herself. "Okay," she whispered. "Good," Ethan said with a grin. No one should eat birthday cake alone. As he and Noah stepped outside, Lila looked down at the small cake on her lap, the one Ethan had bought for her, and smiled faintly. For the first time in years, the day didn't feel like just another reminder of what she'd lost. It felt like the start of something new. But when she turned her wheelchair toward the door, the squeaky wheel jammed again. She tried to push, but it wouldn't move. The embarrassment rushed back instantly, her cheeks burning as people watched. Before she could speak, a small voice piped up near the door. Noah's voice. "Dad, she can't get out." Ethan turned immediately, rushing back toward her, and that was when Lila saw it. The way his hand trembled slightly as he reached for the wheelchair handle. The way his eyes flinched at the pain. "Something about him wasn't right. Are you okay?" she asked softly. He smiled, but there was something behind it, a shadow, a secret. "Yeah," he said. "Just old wounds." But the way his fingers flexed told another story, and as they rolled out of the bakery together, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was hiding something far heavier than just a few scars. The sun was beginning its slow descent when they reached the park. The sky was brushed with shades of amber and rose, soft light glimmering off the fountain at the center. Children's laughter echoed from the swings, and the smell of roasted peanuts drifted through the air. Lila had almost forgotten what laughter sounded like, how the world looked when you actually lifted your eyes to it. Ethan and Noah guided her toward the big oak tree he'd mentioned. Its thick roots curled like old fingers through the grass, and its branches cast a gentle shade over a weathered wooden bench. Ethan placed the cake box carefully on the seat, while Noah knelt beside Lila's wheelchair, his curiosity bright and unfiltered. "Is it really your birthday?" the boy asked. Lila smiled shyly. "Yeah, 15. Cool. I'm 7. Dad says that's old enough to eat extra cake." Ethan chuckled from behind them. "That's not exactly what I said, bud." Lila giggled, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. There was something disarming about Noah, and something quietly protective about Ethan. They didn't look like much. His clothes were worn, his shoes slightly torn, but they carried an energy she'd never felt from anyone in a long time, warmth without pity. As Ethan lit the candles, the flicker of orange light danced on Lila's face. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the frosting, and for a brief, fragile moment she didn't see the girl in the wheelchair. She saw herself as she used to be, running through fields, hair blowing, laughing freely before everything changed. "Make a wish," Ethan said softly. She hesitated. "Do wishes still come true?" "They do," he said, "if you don't stop making them." Lila closed her eyes. She didn't wish for her legs to work again. That wish had long faded into something too painful to repeat. Instead, she wished for something simpler, that one day she'd stop feeling like a burden, that someone would see her as more than her wheelchair. When she opened her eyes, the candles flickered once more and went out, leaving only a trail of smoke curling into the sunset. Noah clapped. "Yay! That means it's going to come true." They cut the cake together, Ethan careful to hand her the first slice. The frosting was sweet and light, melting on her tongue like childhood memories. "It's perfect," she murmured. "Good," Ethan said, leaning back against the tree trunk. "You deserve at least one good day." The words hit her like a wave. One good day. She thought about all the bad ones. The hospital smell, the pitying stares, the sound of her aunt muttering bills under her breath. And yet here she was, sitting under a tree with two strangers who felt oddly like family. For a while they just talked. Noah showed her his drawings, superheroes and dragons with lopsided smiles. Ethan told her about his job as a mechanic, though he laughed when he admitted he hadn't been working much lately. "Hard to find good work when people think you've had your time," he said. "What do you mean?" Lila asked. He shrugged. "Got hurt a while back. Messed up my shoulder and back. Doctor said I shouldn't lift anything heavy anymore. Guess that's half the job gone right there." Lila frowned. "Was that from today?" He smiled faintly. "No, long before that. Though today didn't help." He winced slightly as he shifted, rubbing his shoulder. She noticed the tattoo on his wrist again, the name etched into his skin. Maya. "Is that your wife's name?" she asked gently. The silence that followed was heavy but not awkward. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, she passed away 3 years ago. Car accident." The air seemed to still. Even the leaves quieted for a moment. Leila's breath caught in her throat. I'm so sorry," he smiled, tired, tender. She was the kind of person who'd give away her umbrella in the rain and pretend she didn't need it. "Some people leave holes too big to fill, you know?" Leila nodded. She didn't say it aloud, but she understood that kind of hole too well. Ethan looked at her, his eyes gentle but sharp enough to see right through her silence. "You've lost someone too, haven't you?" Her lips trembled. "My parents. 2 years ago. A truck hit us. She looked down at her lap, the faint outline of her legs beneath the blanket. "I walked into the hospital, but I didn't walk out." Noah's hand slipped into hers without hesitation. "You're really brave," he said softly. Tears welled in her eyes. "No, I'm not." Ethan leaned forward. "You showed up today, didn't you? You tried to buy your own cake. That's brave. That's living, kiddo." His voice carried something unshakable, like a man who'd been through hell and still believed the sun would rise. And in that moment, something in Leila cracked open. The loneliness, the quiet ache she carried, it began to thaw. As twilight deepened, they finished the cake together, laughing when Noah got frosting on his nose. For once, Leila didn't feel like she was being pitied. She felt seen. But just as the laughter faded into quiet comfort, Ethan's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, frowning at the screen. One glance and the warmth drained from his face. "Everything okay?" Leila asked. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just something I need to take care of." Noah frowned. "Is it about the money, Dad?" Ethan's head snapped around. "Noah," but it was too late. The boy's words hung in the air, sharp and confusing. Leila's eyes widened. "Money?" Ethan rubbed his face. "It's nothing, just some trouble I'm sorting out." He stood quickly, almost too quickly. "Come on, buddy, we should head home." The sudden change in his tone left Leila unsettled. She wanted to ask more, but something in his expression told her not to. Still, as she watched him walk away, shoulders tense, hand gripping his son's tightly, the question burned in her mind. What kind of trouble could a man that kind have? And as the shadows grew longer under the old oak tree, Leila felt an uneasy certainty that this wasn't the last time she'd see him. Something was coming, something that would test them both in ways neither was ready for. That night, the city seemed quieter than usual. The soft hum of passing cars outside Leila's window mingled with the faint whistle of wind through the cracks of the old apartment building. She sat by the window, the small pink cake box beside her, half empty now but still glowing faintly in the moonlight like a symbol of something sacred. Her aunt was asleep in the next room, television still flickering with late-night commercials. Leila couldn't stop thinking about Ethan, the way he smiled through pain, the way his eyes clouded when Noah mentioned money. It all lingered in her mind. Heroes, she realized, didn't always wear capes. Sometimes they wore old flannel shirts and tried to hide their bruises with humor. She opened her drawer and pulled out an old photo of her parents. Her father's arm wrapped around her mother, both of them laughing at the camera. She traced their faces with her thumb. "You would have liked him," she whispered. "He's good." Meanwhile, across town, Ethan sat at a small kitchen table littered with overdue bills. The room was dim, the only light coming from a flickering bulb above. Noah was asleep in the next room, curled up with his stuffed dinosaur. Ethan's hands shook as he opened another letter, red ink across the top. Final notice. He let out a long breath and leaned back, rubbing his temples. His body ached from the earlier accident, but the pain wasn't what kept him awake. It was the helplessness. The constant feeling that no matter how hard he worked, it wasn't enough. After Maya died, he had done everything he could to keep their small world intact. But between medical bills, rent, and trying to raise a child alone, life had eaten away at his savings until there was nothing left but debt and exhaustion. The mechanic shop had cut his hours after his back injury. Liability reasons, they'd said, and finding new work. Had been a battle against employers who saw his limp before. They saw his skill. He picked up his phone, scrolling through missed calls and unread messages from a number he didn't want to see. Rick, Auto Credit Collections. The voicemails all sounded the same. "You're behind again, Ethan. If we don't get payment soon, we'll have to take the car. The car. The one thing that still connected him to Maya. It was the car they'd driven to their wedding, the one he'd rebuilt for her himself. Losing it would feel like losing her all over again. He sighed, closing his eyes, remembering her laughter echoing through the garage, teasing him for the grease stains on his shirt. "You can fix everything but your own mess," she'd said once, smiling. He'd kissed her hand and replied, "That's because you're my favorite project." The memory ached like a wound that refused to close. A soft knock came at his door. He tensed, too late for visitors. When he opened it, a man in a black jacket stood outside. Tall, heavy-set, his face half hidden by the streetlight. "Evening, Ethan," the man said, voice low and cold. "We need to talk." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Rick, it's late. My kid's asleep." Rick stepped closer, smirking. "Then I'll keep it short. You're 2 months behind. I've been patient, but my boss is losing it. You've got until Friday or the car's gone." Ethan clenched his jaw. "You can't just show up here." Rick's smile faded. "I can, and I just did. You think I like doing this? You're a good guy, Ethan, but good doesn't pay bills. You got friends, family, anyone who can help?" Ethan looked away. "Not anymore." Rick sighed, almost pitying. "Then figure something out. I'll be back." He turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Ethan standing in the doorway, fists trembling. When the door shut, Ethan leaned his forehead against it and exhaled shakily. Friday, that gave him 4 days. 4 days to come up with nearly $2,000, or lose the last piece of the life he once had. He sat back down, staring at the candle wax still melted from Lila's birthday cake earlier that day. The image of her smile, fragile yet bright, filled his mind. He had felt something stirring inside him when he saw her, something he hadn't felt since Maya. That small, stubborn will to protect, to believe. He couldn't let Noah see him fall apart again. The boy had already lost enough. The next morning came too soon. Ethan forced himself out of bed, wincing as his back screamed in protest. He made Noah breakfast, just toast and jam, the cheap kind, but smiled through it anyway. "Are we going to the park again?" Noah asked. "Maybe later, champ. I've got to figure out some work first." Noah's shoulders drooped, but he nodded obediently. "Can I draw while you do?" Ethan ruffled his hair. "Yeah, buddy. You can draw anywhere." As Noah ran off for his crayons, Ethan pulled out his phone again. He scrolled through his contacts until he reached a name he hadn't touched in years. Mike, his old army buddy. The last time they'd spoken, Ethan had turned down a risky job offer from him. Private security work, Mike had called it. Back then, Ethan had been proud enough to say no. But pride didn't pay rent. He hovered over the call button, hesitation tightening his chest, then he pressed it. "Ethan, long time, man." Mike's voice came through the line, warm but sharp-edged. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "Long time? Listen, Mike, you still got that job?" There was a pause. "You sure you want in on that, brother? It's not your kind of thing." "I don't have a choice anymore," Mike exhaled. "All right. Meet me Thursday night, old shop on 5th. We'll talk." When Ethan hung up, he looked toward the table where Noah's drawings lay scattered, bright, innocent, full of life. He pressed his hand to his face and whispered, "I'll fix this. I promise." But he didn't notice the small shape standing at the hallway corner, Noah, watching silently, his eyes full of worry, and across town, at that same moment, Lila was wheeling herself toward the community center for her weekly therapy session, unaware that the man who had changed her birthday was about to step into a choice that could change both of their lives forever. Thursday arrived with a strange heaviness in the air, a kind of stillness that seemed to warn of something about to break. The city buzzed as always, but for Ethan, each sound felt distant, muted. His stomach churned from lack of sleep. He'd spent the last few nights pretending everything was fine for Noah's sake, but inside he was a storm of worry, guilt, and desperation. He stood outside the old auto shop on 5th Street, the one he and Mike used to work in before the war changed them both. The place had long since closed down, its paint peeling, a faint stench of oil still clinging to the cracked walls. A single light glowed from inside, flickering against the dust-streaked windows. Mike was there, bigger than Ethan remembered, his face hardened by years of hard choices. He grinned when he saw Ethan, though his eyes didn't carry the same warmth they once did. Well, the hero mechanic himself," Mike said, extending a hand. Ethan forced a smile. You said there was work. Mike gestured toward a small table inside, cluttered with tools and papers. Sit, let's talk. Ethan followed him in, the old floorboards creaking beneath his boots. A half-finished motorcycle sat in the corner, and the air smelled like rust and gasoline. Here's the deal, Mike began, leaning forward. A friend of mine, private collector type, needs a vehicle moved from one location to another. It's already paid for, but the guy wants it done quietly. You get it there by morning and you walk away with $2,000, easy. Ethan frowned. Quietly. What kind of car is this? Mike smirked. You don't need to know. You're not stealing it. You're just relocating it. You've got the hands for it. I remember you used to say engines talk to you. Ethan's stomach tightened. If it's clean, why can't your friend just hire a delivery company? Mike's grin faded. Look, man, I'm not here to convince you. I'm giving you a chance. You said you were out of options. I'm handing you one. Ethan's mind raced. $2,000. It was exactly what he needed. But something about Mike's tone, it carried the same edge he'd heard in the army before missions that never made it into reports. The kind of edge that left scars. I have a kid, Ethan said quietly. I can't get mixed up in anything stupid. Mike's voice softened just slightly. You think I'd drag you into something that'd put Noah at risk? It's just a car. That's it. In and out. Ethan stared at the ground, his jaw clenched. He could hear Maya's voice in his head, her laugh, her calm warnings. You always want to fix things, even when they're broken for a reason. But then he pictured Noah, sleeping beside his stuffed dinosaur, unaware that their home, their car, their fragile peace all hung by a thread. He exhaled slowly. All right, one job. Then I'm done. Mike smiled, slapping his shoulder. That's the Ethan I remember. They spent the next hour going over the details, addresses, times, a key that looked far too ordinary to belong to anything illegal. By the time Ethan stepped out into the night, his chest felt tight. The air was cold, biting against his skin. He started walking home, the city lights blurring through the fog, guilt gnawing at his conscience with every step. Meanwhile, across town, Lila wheeled herself through the community center parking lot. Her therapist, an older woman named Ms. Reeves, smiled at her from the doorway. So you made good progress today, sweetheart. You're pushing harder every week. Lila nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. I want to get stronger, Ms. Reeves smiled. You're already stronger than most people I know. Lila tried to smile back, but her mind wasn't in the session. It was on Ethan, and the look on his face when he'd said old wounds. Something about it haunted her. She'd thought about calling him, but she didn't even have his number. All she knew was the park and the bakery, two small places that now carried the weight of something she didn't fully understand. As she rolled out of the building, she noticed a small commotion by the curb. Two men were arguing near a car, voices sharp, tense. She froze when she recognized one of them. Ethan, he hadn't seen her. He was talking to a man she didn't recognize, big, rough-looking, dressed in black. Lila stayed quiet, watching from the shadows of the lamppost. I said I'll do it, Ethan was saying, his voice low but firm. But I need half up front. The man crossed his arms. Not how it works. Ethan stepped closer. I've got a kid, man. I'm not risking everything for nothing. The man gave a small, cold smile. Then maybe this isn't your kind of job. He turned to leave, but Ethan grabbed his arm. Wait. The man spun around so fast Lila flinched. He shoved Ethan hard against the car, his voice dropping into a growl. Don't touch me. You either do the job or you don't. No more talking. Ethan didn't fight back. He just stood there, jaw tight, breathing hard. Finally, he nodded. Fine. The man released him and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Lila's heart pounded. She had no idea what she'd just witnessed, but the fear in Ethan's eyes said enough. This wasn't just about money. Whatever he'd gotten into, it was dangerous. Ethan leaned against the car for a moment, staring at the ground before he finally walked away. When he was gone, Lila wheeled herself slowly out of hiding, her pulse still racing. She didn't know why, but she knew she couldn't stay silent. He had saved her once. Maybe now it was her turn to do the same. That night, while Ethan sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at the car key Mike had given him, Lila lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Something told her that by tomorrow, both of their lives would take a turn they couldn't undo. And as the first drops of rain began to fall outside, The city felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable. The rain came down in relentless sheets, turning the streets into mirrors of silver and shadow. Each drop echoed like a ticking clock, counting down to something neither Ethan nor Lila could see coming. It was just after midnight when Ethan sat in his car, engine idling, the key from Mike heavy in his pocket. The dashboard lights painted his face in ghostly green, reflecting the turmoil twisting inside him. The city around him slept, but his mind was wide awake, looping through the same thoughts over and over. I need the money. I can't lose the car. I can't lose Noah. He looked at the photograph taped to the visor, Maya holding baby Noah, sunlight pouring across their faces. I'm sorry, he whispered, voice trembling. I just need to fix this one thing. He turned the key in the ignition and drove. The address Mike had given him was in the industrial district, rows of warehouses that stretched like forgotten skeletons. The rain slicked across the asphalt, glinting under the flicker of half-dead streetlights. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with each turn. When he reached the location, a black SUV was already waiting under a flickering lamp. Mike stepped out, cigarette glowing between his fingers. Right on time, he said, grinning like they were still old buddies. Let's get this over with, Ethan muttered. Mike gestured to a metal shutter nearby. The car's inside. Keys are in the glove box. You take it to the lot on Elm. Someone'll meet you there, no questions asked. Ethan hesitated. And it's clean? No trouble? Mike's eyes flicked away for just a second. Course it's clean, brother. Just drive. That single flicker of hesitation should have told him everything, but desperation has a way of silencing instincts. Ethan nodded, stepped into the warehouse and found the car. A sleek black sedan that looked far too new to be sitting in a place like this. He slid into the driver's seat. The smell of fresh leather filled his lungs, but beneath it something faint, a metallic scent he couldn't place. He pushed the thought away and started the engine. The drive through the rain was long and heavy. Every streetlight felt like a spotlight, every shadow like a watchful eye. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and back across town Lila couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Ethan in that parking lot, the fear in his voice, the way that man had shoved him. Something about it gnawed at her chest. Against her aunt's protests, she had borrowed her neighbor's phone earlier that evening and looked up the nearest police precinct. Now she sat with the number dialed on her screen, thumb hovering over the call button, but she hesitated. What would she even say? That a kind man who bought her a cake might be in trouble. That she'd seen him talking to someone shady. It sounded absurd, like the kind of worry people brushed off. Instead, she grabbed the old notebook her mother used to tell her to write in when she couldn't sleep. On the first blank page, she wrote his name in shaky handwriting, Ethan. Underneath it, she wrote, "Find him. Help him." The rain outside grew heavier. Back on the road, Ethan finally reached Elm Street. The lot was quiet, surrounded by chain-link fences and the hum of distant neon signs. Another man stood waiting under an umbrella. When Ethan pulled up, the man stepped closer, face hidden by the shadows. "You're late," the man said flatly. "Traffic," Ethan replied, forcing calm. "Here's your car." The man opened the passenger door, reached inside, and grabbed a small black duffel bag from the back seat. He unzipped it slightly, and Ethan's heart stopped when he saw the stacks of cash inside, neatly wrapped in rubber bands. "What the hell is this?" Ethan whispered. The man looked up, his voice cold. "I didn't see anything." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Mike said this was just a delivery." The man's eyes narrowed. "Hey, I talk too much?" Before Ethan could react, the man pulled a gun from his jacket. The metallic click echoed louder than the thunder. Ethan froze, hands instinctively raised. "Wait, look, I didn't know. I don't want any part of this." The man stepped closer. "You're already part of it." Ethan's thoughts scattered. Maya's voice, Noah's face, Lila's smile, all flashing before him in fragments. Not like this. Not in front of his son's memory. Suddenly, headlights swept across the lot. Another car turned the corner, its horn blaring. The man flinched and lowered the gun just slightly. It was enough. Ethan kicked the door open and bolted, sprinting toward the nearest alley. The gun went off once, then again, bullets sparking against the wet asphalt. He ducked behind a dumpster, heart hammering in his throat. The rain masked his heavy breathing as the gunman shouted, "You can't run forever." But Ethan was already gone, slipping into the maze of back streets, soaked and trembling. He ran until his legs gave out, collapsing against the brick wall of an abandoned diner. He looked down and realized his shoulder was bleeding, a grazing wound from the bullet. His hands shook uncontrollably. He pulled his phone from his pocket, but the screen was cracked from the fall. No signal. He closed his eyes and pressed his forehead to the wall, whispering to no one, "What did I do?" And somewhere across town, Lila jolted awake from a nightmare she couldn't explain. Ethan's face in the rain, the sound of thunder like gunfire. She gasped and reached for her chair. Something inside her told her she needed to go. Now, meanwhile, Ethan stumbled into a narrow alley and slumped beside an old payphone, blood dripping down his sleeve. He lifted the receiver with trembling hands and dropped a few coins in. There was only one number he remembered by heart. When Noah's sleepy voice came through the line, Ethan nearly broke. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, fighting back the pain. "It's Dad." "Daddy? Where are you? Why do you sound funny?" Ethan's throat tightened. "I just wanted to say, I love you. More than anything. You remember that, okay? Are you coming home?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I'm trying." The line buzzed with static and then it went dead. He leaned back against the wall, exhausted, bleeding, lost. The sirens in the distance grew louder, closer. But what neither he nor Lila knew was that fate was already moving to bring them back together again. Because by dawn, their paths would cross in a way that would change both of their lives forever. The night finally began to surrender to the pale light of dawn. The rain had stopped, but the street still glistened, like the city itself was weeping for the lives tangled within it. Ethan sat slumped against the cold brick wall, his breath shallow, one hand pressed against his bleeding shoulder. The gunman's words still echoed in his mind. "You're already part of it." He wanted to scream, to undo everything, but all that came out was a broken whisper. "I just wanted to make things right." Then, in the distance, he heard the faint rumble of a wheelchair over cracked pavement. He thought he was hallucinating at first, but then a soft voice called out, trembling yet determined, "Ethan?" He looked up. Through the mist, rolling down the alley with her hair damp from the rain, came Lila. Her thin blanket was wrapped around her shoulders like a cloak, her face pale but fierce with worry. She must have followed the sound of the sirens, her heart pulling her in his direction like a compass that refused to fail. "Lila," Ethan breathed, barely believing it was real. "You shouldn't be here." She ignored him, pushing her chair closer until she was right in front of him. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," he said, though the blood soaking through his sleeve told a different story. "No, you're not," she insisted, voice cracking. "Tell me what happened." He tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. I made a mistake. I tried to fix everything and just made it worse." His eyes filled with tears he'd held back for years. "I wanted to give my son a life that didn't end up like mine. I thought if I did one wrong thing for the right reason." Lila reached out and gently touched his hand. Her palm was cold but steady. "You did one brave thing for the right reason when you helped me," she whispered. "That's the man you really are. Not this." Her words pierced through the fog of guilt surrounding him. For a moment the world seemed still, the air thick with the smell of rain, the faint hum of dawn traffic in the distance. "Lila," he said softly, voice breaking, "I don't deserve forgiveness." "Then earn it," she said simply. Before he could respond, the echo of sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights danced off the wet brick walls. Lila's eyes widened. "Ethan!" "You have to go." He shook his head weakly. "No, running got me here. I'm done hiding." A police car screeched to a halt at the end of the alley. Two officers stepped out, flashlights cutting through the early morning haze. "Hands where we can see them," one shouted. Ethan slowly raised his hands, blood dripping down his arm. "It's not what it looks like," he said, but the officer had already pulled out the cuffs. Lila wheeled herself in front of him, blocking their view. "Wait, he didn't do anything wrong," she cried. "He was trying to help someone. Please, just listen." The younger officer hesitated. "Ma'am, step aside." Tears streaked down her cheeks. "He's a good man. He saved me when no one else would. Please, don't take him away before he gets a chance to be the father his son deserves." Ethan's throat tightened as he looked at her, this fragile, fierce girl defending him like a warrior. He placed a shaking hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly. "I need to face this." The officers exchanged glances. One of them, a grizzled older man, lowered his flashlight. "What's your name, son?" "Ethan Reed." "Mike Thompson, that name mean anything to you?" Ethan froze. "Yeah, he's the one who dragged me into this." The officer nodded grimly. "He's already in custody. We found him trying to dump the car. Said you ran off with the evidence." Ethan's heart stuttered. "The bag?" The officer lifted a sealed duffel from the back of the squad car. "This one, full of stolen charity funds from a children's hospital." Lila gasped. Ethan stared at it, realization and horror flooding him. "He told me it was a delivery job," he said weakly. "I swear I didn't know." The officer studied his face, then looked at Lila, at her trembling hands, her unwavering eyes. After a long moment, he sighed. "You'll still have to come with us and make a statement, son. But if what you're saying is true, you might have just helped us catch a much bigger thief." Ethan's shoulders slumped with relief. "I'll tell you everything." They helped him into the squad car, wrapping a bandage around his arm. Lila stayed by the door until they drove away, her reflection trembling in the wet glass. "You'll be okay," she whispered. "You have to be." Weeks passed. The story hit local news. Single dad unknowingly helps ex-con move stolen charity funds, then turns him in. Reporters called Ethan a reluctant hero. The hospital recovered its money. Mike was sentenced to years in prison, but the real story happened quietly, away from the cameras. It happened the day Ethan stepped out of the courthouse, arm in a sling, free but changed. Waiting outside in her wheelchair was Lila, holding 2 small cupcakes with 3 candles each. "For what?" he asked, smiling faintly. "For your freedom," she said. "And for my birthday." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You remembered." "I remember everything," she said. "Especially people who don't walk away when things get hard." He took 1 cupcake and handed her a folded envelope. "This is for you," she frowned. "What is it?" "An application. There's a rehabilitation center I found. They help with physical therapy for people with spinal injuries. I already talked to someone there. They'll take you for free." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do this for me?" Ethan smiled, his voice gentle. "Because once someone gave me hope when I thought I didn't deserve any. Now it's my turn." They sat there on the courthouse steps as the city buzzed around them, 2 broken souls mending each other in silence. Lila looked at him, candlelight flickering in her eyes. "Do you ever think things happen for a reason?" Ethan took a deep breath, looking at the sunrise spreading gold across the sky. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think sometimes the people we save end up saving us too." The candles flickered, their small flames reflected in the tears streaming down both their faces. Lila smiled. "Make a wish, Ethan." He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time in years he didn't wish for what he'd lost. He wished for what he'd found. They blew out the candles together, the smoke curling into the morning air like a promise of new beginnings. And in that quiet, fragile dawn, a paralyzed girl and a broken single father proved that kindness doesn't just change lives, it saves them. Moral. Even the smallest act of compassion can ripple through darkness and bring light to places we never thought would shine again.